Hi guys, so in this video I want to show you what's happening in my mini fish room. In previous video I've showed you my main display tank, which is in the same room, but this is another part of my fish keeping, I would say, and that's of course not a proper fish room. It's something like more of a Harry Potter style under the staircase storage place fish room, but nevertheless it has a number of tanks and there is a number of things happening in here which I haven't showed you before, so I will take you through this little space that I have in here, and I'll show you what's happening in this fish room. So basically I would say that initially I planned this little space, well, there's 6 tanks in here, as a place to breed some fish, because it's been a while since I've been breeding fish, and having this opportunity to have an extra space for my hobby, I've decided to create a few breeding projects in here. All of them are essentially either Pleco or Corridors breeding projects, and this is because I don't really have space for anything larger in here. I keep here several species of Hypancisters and Ancistors Plecos, and I'll show you more in details what I have in here. And in here also I have Plecos and Coris. Of course I'd like to breed, let's say, Altum angels or wild types of angelfish. This is what I dream to breed in future, but obviously there's not enough space for either of these fish in here, and the only thing that I can more or less effectively breed in this limited space are small species of Plecos or Corridors. So that's what I'm doing in here. Also, they do not require as much effort on part of the breeder as, let's say, dwarf cichlids or carotines, which require certainly more care and more efforts when you're breeding them. So let's start with this tank. This is a 140-liter system. So in here I have a group of Hypancisters L333 King Tiger Plecos. There's 5 of them in here actually. It's a gold variant, and there's quite a collection of this fish in here. I've got a pair, a male and female, of wild caught fish from Pierre Aquatics. So I haven't seen any breeding from them yet, but they've all arrived quite soon, and I'm feeding them up at the moment, trying to make them gain more weight and basically conditioning them for breeding. There's also 2 of these royal whiptails in here. I've bought them as really tiny fish from a local fish store, and I didn't know the species because they also did not know the Latin name of this fish, but I'm guessing that's aureum. That could be festivum, but they're still juveniles, so once they will gain more weight and more size, I would be able to tell their species more or less. And yeah, they're actually quite a perfect deezer fish for Hypancisters Plecos, because they don't bother Hypancisters, and they pick up all the leftover food in the tank, and they are quite striking fish, to be honest. So yeah, this tank is filtered by 2 sponge filters, 2 large sponge filters. I also have here a power head, which I will replace. It's 800 liters per hour power head, but I will replace it with a more powerful power head, which I've got already, 1200 liters, because they certainly love current, they love flow, and I guess more flow there is, happier they are, and probably that will also get them into breeding shape. The temperature is quite warm in here. I'm keeping this tank at about 28 degrees Celsius. So yeah, basically, and in terms of light, I have this IKEA spotlight lamp. It's actually a very energy saving lamp. I think it's only like a couple of watts, and it does provide quite enough light for the plants. And in terms of plants, I only have this Christmas moss growing on bogwood, and that's it in terms of plants. But in any case, it's fairly bright in here, and the fish are not too stressed out because they obviously don't like bright lights. Yeah, they're not very active at the moment. Well, in this tank, in this small tank in here, which has a lot of reflection, I have a pair of ancestors 393 Cheese Creek ancestors. They are very shy and very secretive. I hardly ever see them, but I know they're alive and they're here because they're feeding and there's lots of feces on the bottom. And well, I got them from Fish Barn, and they were not sold as a pair because they were juveniles and there were only 2 left at the shop. So but they appear to be male and female, because I can see now whenever I see them, which doesn't happen very often, that they're actually a male and female. And yes, they have very basic setup in here. Is a sponge filter, some floating plants, hornwort in here, and some Brazilian moss growing on bogwood. I'm feeding them variety of foods, ripache, and also some courgette, as you can see in here. And male is usually hiding in one of the Pleco caves here, but he doesn't seem to be there at the moment. So yeah, apologies for the reflection, there's just no other way to film it. Yeah, so this is a relatively small tank. It's a 60-liter tank, but they are currently a small fish. They're maybe like 6 or 7 centimeters each, and they're certainly not fully grown yet. I would say they're sub-adults, so I would probably need to wait to see any sort of a breeding action from them. Let's move down. So in here I have another Pleco breeding project. I have here a pair of ancestors 309 green spot ancestors. Yeah, I'm feeding them courgette, as you can see, and ripache, and some algae wafers, and a few other things. This is a slightly larger tank. This is an 80-liter tank, and it has basically very similar plants to my other tanks. Lots of Brazilian moss or Christmas moss growing on bogwood, and lots of Brazilian pennywort, Hydrocotyle leucocephala. I have here a sponge filter and a power head, and there's actually quite a lot of flow in this tank because that's what they like. And yeah, that's basically the only plants that I could make grow in so much current. The same goes for these are fish. I can't really add anything in here because there is so much flow in here, and I can't imagine any small fish being able to cope with so much flow, and obviously this tank is too small for a larger fish. So there's just 2 of them living in here. I got this pair from Pierre Aquatics a while ago, and they've said that this is actually the only time when they had these Plecos in stock, so that's the first time they imported them, and they're quite rare. Yeah, they're beautiful pair, and I'm hoping that they will start breeding soon. But again, just like with other fish, they arrived quite soon, so I'm basically power feeding them. In here I have my little farm of grindal worms. I'll make a separate video about it. Over here I've got a 90-liter tank, which is currently empty. Well, yeah, it has some Pleco cave, so most likely I will get some other species of Hypancistros or Ancestros Plecos as another breeding project. But as things stand, this is actually an empty tank, and doesn't have anything at the moment, but it has everything connected. There will be sponge filter in here, there is a light here. Actually in here I'm also using a spotlight. This is not an IKEA spotlight, but both of these spotlights are some sort of a really cheap spotlights which I've got on eBay, and they only have like this one I think has a 5-watt bulb, and this one has 4-watt bulb, so they're energy saving. These are LED lamps, and they provide tons of light. Actually for the plants, that's more than enough. I can say that both the moss and pennywort, they are thriving in here. They're growing well, and because these plex herbivorous plex, and you can see the tail of probably a male popping up in here. Because they're carnivore herbivorous plex, they enjoy all this algae growth, and they feed off all this algae on the bogwood. And let's look at the other project. This is certainly the most good looking setup that I have in here. You probably remember this tank because previously it used to be in here, and I relocated it here and I slightly rescaped it. So this is basically my unheated South American biotop style setup. It's been ages since I've showed you this setup last time, and it has changed quite a bit. Actually, it has matured a bit and it has become more good looking, I would say. So well, obviously I don't heat this tank, and it stays at the room temperature, which is about 20 degrees Celsius normally. It has a very powerful LED lamp to grow plants, and a sponge filter and a power head. So that's all about equipment. In here I have my group of Corydoras Aenius Trinidad wild-caught bronze cories, which used to live in this tank before. That's one of the females, I think. They're still subadults. I bought them as really small juveniles, but they're subadults now, and they're doing great actually. I'm conditioning them for breeding, and they seem to be very responsive to my efforts to condition them. So there's quite a number of fat females in here, and I think there's a couple of males. The entire group consists of 9 fish. There is also leftovers of my Apheocharox rasbani. I used to have a larger group, but I had them in that tank where I have L33 now, and I fed L33. I was still feeding them quite a lot with bloodworms, and our Apheocharox rasbani do not seem to do well with bloodworms. Some of them have choked on bloodworms, so I only have 4 of them left, but they're beautiful fish as well. I also have here a group of 5 rubber nose or bulldog plecos, Chaetostoma species. They are hiding most of the time. That's one of them in here. They seem to be doing well in here because there's quite a lot of flow. The water is quite cool, and normally that's what they like. In the wild, that's another one. I believe there are 2 males and 3 females, but also they are not fully grown adults. They're subadults, and I'm feeding them some algae wafers, ripashi, and a few other foods, flake foods, and they seem to be growing well as well. They normally live among those slate rocks in here. That's their setup, and they seem to be enjoying this. So there's quite a collection of plants in here. You can see there's lots of Brazilian moss or Christmas moss growing on top of this bogwood in the back, and doing quite well. There's lots of hornwort, lots of Brazilian pennywort, quite a bit of Voroletus, golden pothos, a piece of Boston fern, some Echinodoros polyfolios, which I've saved from my main display tank because it was basically withering away in there. That's another Echinodoros polyfolios, and some dwarf sage, which seems to be growing in here, to be honest. So yeah, that's a fairly beautiful setup, very low maintenance, 3 species of fish, generally quite active, but at the moment a bit too shy. I'm really enjoying this Corydoras. Well, that's a female feeding on ripashi, and they are quite colorful. Not this particular one, but the rest are quite colorful and very interesting cories to watch over. Right, and the last tank, which doesn't have any fish, it's actually my colony of black worms, which I'm cultivating more or less successfully. I will make a separate video about this culture of black worms that I have in here, and I'll show you how I basically breed them, if you can use the word breeding, and how I collect them and how I feed them to my fish there, but that will be in a separate video. Right, so that's basically what's happening at the moment in this small space that I have in here. And yeah, I'm planning to set up this tank sometime soon, and we'll get some species of hip ancestors or ancestors plecos to live in this setup. Yes, not very active tanks, not much is happening in there, but that's absolutely fine, because I enjoy spending some time doing maintenance in here and just checking how things go, but they don't require too much maintenance, to be honest, and that's what I like about the setups. I do occasional water changes, I feed them, and they definitely do not require massive water changes, and they are also quite peaceful fish. Right, so don't forget to leave your comments in the comment section. What do you think about this nice looking space under the staircase, and what do you think about these breeding projects? And I'll see you soon in other videos.